Nobody talks about the smell of London in November. Not the postcards. Not the travel blogs. Not a single one of those YouTube thumbnails with a red phone box and a guardsman standing like furniture. It's damp wool and exhaust and something faintly floral from the park. And that morning, standing outside Buckingham Palace at 9:30, I remember thinking, this is exactly what I expected, and somehow I wasn't ready for any of it. I'd been in the city 4 days. Long enough to stop panicking at the tube map. Long enough to feel brave about ordering coffee without apologizing 3 times first. I had one more full day before my flight home, and I'd saved the palace for last on purpose, the way you eat the thing you want most at the end of the meal, just to have something left to look forward to. The changing of the guard wasn't for another 2 hours. I wasn't the only one who'd shown up embarrassingly early. There was a family to my left, German, I think, based on the guidebook and the organized way they'd arranged themselves along the fence. 2 kids. Patient kids, which felt almost suspicious. A man in his 60s with a proper camera, the kind with a lens the length of your forearm, stood just ahead of me. An older woman in a bright yellow rain jacket was narrating quietly into her phone, clearly recording a voice memo for someone back home. The 2 guards at the gates stood the way they always stand in photographs, like they'd been placed there by someone with a very specific aesthetic vision and a deep distrust of personality. Tall. Still. Rifles angled just so. I'd watched one of them the last time I walked past, and caught myself wondering, genuinely, if he blinked. If, under that bearskin hat, there was a real person running calculations on boredom, or whether the institution had somehow bred it out of them entirely. The morning was gray in that specific London way that isn't threatening, just permanent. A low flat sky the color of old dishwater. The kind of cold that doesn't bite. It just settles into your shoulders and stays there. I had a 6 a.m. flight out of Heathrow the next morning. I had a bag half-packed at the hotel. I had a sister who'd texted me 17 times asking if I'd actually seen any royals, as if they wandered the forecourt handing out pamphlets. I had no idea that within the next 40 minutes, the entire morning was going to detonate. It started with a sound. Not dramatic. Nothing cinematic. No crash. No shouting. Just a sound that didn't belong. A kind of muffled urgency from somewhere past the gate, inside the vehicle entrance to the left of the main arch. Like someone moving fast over gravel. Like a door opened, and then shut again too quickly. I noticed it because the German family's kids noticed it first. Children have a radar for wrongness that adults spend years training themselves to ignore. The older boy grabbed his father's sleeve. Not pointing. Just holding. I looked at the guard nearest to me. The one who'd been standing at the left post. The one I'd been half watching for 20 minutes. His eyes moved. That's all. Nothing dramatic. His eyes moved left, toward the sound, and then returned to the middle distance. His body didn't shift. His hands didn't tighten on the rifle. He gave nothing away to the crowd watching him. But he'd heard it. And something in the quality of his stillness changed, the way a room changes when someone in it stops breathing normally. I didn't know what I was watching yet. Her name was Charlotte. I didn't know that then. I learned it later, in pieces, from the people around me who'd been paying closer attention than I had. She was mid-40s, maybe. Well-dressed in the particular way of someone who dressed well without thinking about it. A camel coat, dark trousers, a silk scarf that had probably been tied the same way every morning for 15 years. She had a wheelie case with her, the small cabin-approved kind, and a tote bag over one shoulder, and the focused, slightly harassed expression of a person who is running to a schedule, and the schedule is already losing. She'd come around from the direction of Birdcage Walk, moving at a pace just under a run. The kind of speed that says I am a professional, and professionals do not run in public, but I am very close to running. She stopped at the pedestrian gate. Not the tourist section where we were standing. The other one, the side entrance, the one with the intercom, the one that doesn't open for just anyone. She pressed the buzzer. Once. Then, again almost immediately. And that's when I started paying real attention. Because the guard who'd moved his eyes, he was watching her now. Not the way guards usually look at people, which is through them, the practiced blankness of a man paid to be a fixture. He was watching her the way you watch something that might require a decision. She said something into the intercom. I couldn't hear it. The woman in the yellow rain jacket to my right had gone quiet. Rain jacket down, phone still recording, but pointed at the gate now instead of her own face. The intercom crackled. Charlotte. I still didn't know her name. She was just the woman to me, took one step back from the gate, and something in her posture went strange. Not collapse. More like a structural adjustment. Like a building when the wind picks up. She pressed the buzzer a third time. Nothing. She reached into her tote bag, pulled out her phone, looked at the screen with the particular focused blankness of someone reading news they were hoping had changed since the last time they checked. It hadn't. She pressed the buzzer again, 4 times now, quick, and said something louder this time, and I caught 2 words through the cold air. They've canceled. And then, the gate opened. Not the way it opens for tourists in photographs. Not wide, not ceremonially. Just enough. A narrow slice of courtyard, and a uniformed figure stepping through it. Not a ceremonial guard, different uniform, the working kind. And the 2 of them stood in that gap, and spoke in low, fast voices. The man from the courtyard had his radio in his hand. He wasn't using it. He was just holding it, the way people hold things when they need something solid. Charlotte was nodding. Then, she stopped nodding. Then, she said something, and he shook his head. The gate eased closed again. She stood on the pavement for a moment with her wheelie case beside her, and her hand still half raised toward the intercom that was already behind a closed gate. The man in the camel coat to my left, not German, I'd revised, possibly Swiss, murmured something to his wife. The woman in the yellow jacket was definitely still recording. I was standing very still, the way you stand when you're trying not to disturb something you don't fully understand yet. And the guard at the left post, the one whose eyes had moved, the one who'd heard that first sound, was watching Charlotte in a way that was no longer the practiced blankness of his post. It was recognition. He knew who she was. Which meant whatever was happening inside that gate, it was already bad enough that even the guards knew about it. There is a rule, not a written one, or maybe it is written, I genuinely don't know. But there is an understood rule about the ceremonial guards. They don't engage. Not with tourists. Not with protesters. Not with the man who once walked directly up to one and stood 3 inches from his face, making noise for 4 full minutes while his friends filmed it. Not in rain. Not in heat. Not in the particular London misery that is both at once. They stand. They march their small circuit. They stare into the middle distance where nothing lives. That is the job. That is the whole of it. Which is why what happened next felt like watching gravity take a half second off. Charlotte had stepped back from the gate. Not retreating, recalibrating. She was on her phone now, the wheelie case handle still gripped in one hand, the tote bag sliding off her shoulder, and being caught, and resettled with the automatic efficiency of a woman who was used to managing too many things at once. She was talking to someone. Fast. The hand holding the phone wasn't quite steady. I was close enough to hear fragments. No, they've changed the protocol entirely. Marcus, I'm standing outside, and they won't. A pause. Her jaw tightened. I know what the schedule says. The schedule is not what's happening. The man with the camera, the one with the long lens, had lowered it. He wasn't shooting. He was just watching, with the alert stillness of someone who'd been around enough of the world to know when a situation is developing. The 2 children in the German family had gone very quiet. The younger one had pressed her face against the gap between fence posts. And the guard, left post, the one whose eyes had moved, broke rhythm. Not obviously. Not in a way that would register in a photograph or on a tourist's shaky phone video. It was 3 inches of posture. A micro-rotation of his head. His eyes left the middle distance and went, clearly and deliberately, to Charlotte. He looked at her for 2 full seconds. Then, he looked at the gate. Then, he looked straight ahead again. But something had shifted in the architecture of the moment. A second uniformed figure, civilian staff, no ceremonial elements, a lanyard, sensible shoes, appeared from a door set into the stone to the left of the main arch. Not the gate Charlotte had buzzed. A different one. The kind of door that doesn't advertise itself. She moved quickly, purposefully, right to Charlotte. They spoke for less than 30 seconds. I saw Charlotte's face change. It didn't crumple. She wasn't the crumpling type, you could tell that from 10 meters away. But it went still, the way faces go still when the information arriving is worse than the information they'd already prepared for. The lanyard woman put one hand briefly on Charlotte's forearm. Professional comfort. The kind that says I know this is serious, and I cannot fix it. Then, she was gone, back through the door, which closed with the decisive click of a door that does not open from the outside. Charlotte stood with her phone loose in her hand, and her wheelie case beside her, and the sky that familiar gray above everything. She didn't move for about 15 seconds. The yellow rain jacket woman had stopped recording. Something about the 15 seconds made recording feel wrong. Then, Charlotte picked up her phone again, scrolled something, pressed her lips together, and began making another call. That's when the guard turned his head again. Not slightly this time. Full turn. A real, visible, unauthorized movement. Face toward her, not the middle distance, not the standard forward facing that the post required. The man with the camera raised his lens on instinct, and then lowered it again, like he'd caught himself doing something indecent. The guard was looking at Charlotte the way, there's no other way to describe it, the way someone looks when they know something is happening to a person, and they cannot say so. I found out later, pieced together from other witnesses, from a woman who'd been close enough to hear more of the phone calls, what the crisis was. It wasn't a security breach, which is what my mind had started constructing. It wasn't a medical emergency, no ambulances, no running. It was worse in a quieter way. Charlotte had been the logistics coordinator for a private visit, not a public engagement, not something in any calendar anyone outside a very small circle would know about. Her entire morning, her entire reason for being there with a cabin-approved wheelie case instead of arriving on foot, was a visit that had been abruptly and completely canceled due to something that had happened inside the palace in the hour before she arrived. Something internal. Something that had locked down a particular protocol chain and made her clearance, which she absolutely had, which she had held for years, temporarily, maddeningly, procedurally void. She was standing outside a building she had legitimate reason to enter, holding credentials that the system was currently refusing to honor, watching her entire day's schedule dissolve into the cold November air. The flight she'd booked from Heathrow, she'd been rerouting her travel plans around this visit for a week, was in 4 hours. If she couldn't resolve this in the next 40 minutes, she was either missing the visit or missing the flight. Both mattered. In different registers of her life, both mattered a great deal. The guard did something none of us expected. He spoke. Not to Charlotte. She was too far, and he was at his post, and there were rules older than any of us standing there. But he spoke to the guard rotating up to relieve him, who had appeared from the gatehouse on schedule, the routine handover, nothing unusual in it. And he said something that took less than 5 words, and involved a very slight inclination of his head toward Charlotte. The new guard looked, assessed, gave one brief nod, and the first guard, the one who'd been watching, the one whose stillness had changed, walked his circuit to its natural endpoint, which happened to bring him within 4 meters of the side gate. He did not stop. He did not break protocol in any visible, documentable way. But, as he turned at the corner of his circuit, his arm came up slightly, not pointing, nothing so obvious, and his eyes went directly to a panel on the gatehouse wall. A panel I hadn't noticed. An intercom I hadn't noticed, different to the one Charlotte had been buzzing. And then, he was past it, and returning to position and staring at the middle distance again. Charlotte saw it. I don't know how, she'd been on her phone, but she saw it. She walked to that panel, pressed the button, and, after 2 seconds, the gate opened. Not the narrow slice. Properly open. The uniformed figure from before, and someone else behind him, and a conversation that lasted less than 2 minutes, and Charlotte rolling her wheelie case through the gap with her tote bag resettled on her shoulder, and her phone already in hand, already scrolling, already managing the next thing and the thing after that. The gate closed. The yellow rain jacket woman exhaled so audibly that the Swiss or German man next to her turned to look. The kid with her face between the fence posts pulled back and looked at her father. The man with the camera lowered his lens completely and stared at the gate for a moment, then laughed. A small, private laugh, the kind you make when something surprises you into forgetting you're in public. I stood where I'd been standing for 40 minutes and felt the cold resettling into my shoulders. The guard was at his post, staring at the middle distance, blinking, as it turned out. The changing of the guard started on time. 20 minutes after Charlotte's wheelie case disappeared through that gate, the music started. Actual music, a band, the kind that sounds slightly unreal in person because you've only ever heard it on television, and the crowd that had been loosely scattered along the fence tightened into a proper, jostling audience. I found a gap between the man with the camera and a tall teenager in a university hoodie, and watched the whole ceremony unfold with the particular attention of someone who has just witnessed something that recalibrated their understanding of everything they were looking at. Because here's what I kept thinking. Through the precision of it, through the extraordinary orchestrated formality of it, The immaculate choreography of men who had rehearsed the same movements until the movements weren't decisions anymore. Somewhere underneath all of that, there were people making quiet choices. Small ones. Ones that would never be in any official record, and never appear in any photograph, and never get credited to anyone by name. A 3-second redirect. An arm raised slightly at a corner turn. 5 words to a colleague arriving for a routine shift handover. That was it. That was the whole of the intervention. And it had changed somebody's entire day. I stayed until the ceremony finished. I don't know what I was waiting for. Some kind of conclusion, maybe. Some acknowledgement from someone that the thing I'd watched was real, that it had happened, that I hadn't constructed the whole of it out of cold air and an overactive travel-tired imagination. But that is not how those moments work. The crowd dispersed with the slow, satisfied shuffle of people who had gotten what they came for. The German family. I'd committed to German. Reassembled their formation and moved toward the park. The yellow rain jacket woman put her phone away and headed in the direction of Victoria. The man with the camera did one final pass of the gate with his lens, then capped it. The guards returned to position. New ones, now. The ceremony had rotated them out entirely, standing with the same practiced blankness, the same forward-facing discipline, the same artful removal of personality from the equation. I stood at the fence for another few minutes after nearly everyone had gone. I am not sure what I was doing. Paying some kind of respects to something that didn't need them. Trying to fix the image of it before the city swallowed it. My sister texted me again as I turned to walk back towards St. James's Park. Did you see any royals? I thought about how to answer that. I thought about Charlotte, who by now was either inside that building working through whatever had needed working through, or back in a taxi to Heathrow with her phone against her ear, and her camel coat collar turned up against the November damp, or both. Multitasking the way people do when their entire schedule has been cracked open and reassembled in a single morning. I thought about the gate that had opened after the one that wouldn't. I thought about the guard who had spent his entire career building the skill of not reacting into his body at the cellular level, and who had, in 3 inches of posture and 5 words and the barest suggestion of a gesture, reacted anyway. Not for cameras. Not for a crowd. Not for anything that would ever be attributed to him or folded into the ceremony's mythology. Just because a person was standing on the wrong side of a gate with a flight to catch, and for hours left in which to catch it. I texted my sister back, kind of. Not exactly. It's hard to explain. She sent back 3 question marks and a crown emoji. I put my phone in my pocket and walked into the park. The trees were bare the way November trees are, skeletal, unsentimental, filtering the flat light into something almost beautiful if you weren't in a hurry. The path along the lake was nearly empty. A man was feeding ducks with the focused dedication of someone with nowhere else to be. I walked slowly. I had one more night in this city. A 6 a.m. flight. A bag to finish packing and a room to leave tidy and a hotel key card to return. None of it felt particularly urgent anymore. There's a version of this story that is about ceremony, about the precision of institutions and the weight of tradition and the visual language of power arranged for public consumption. That version is real. I watched it. It was extraordinary in the flat, gray, November morning in exactly the way it's supposed to be. But the version I carried out of there, the one I still think about, standing in kitchens, sitting on trains, in the particular mental drift of airports, is smaller than that. A woman with a wheelie case and a problem the ceremony couldn't see. A gate that opened because someone inside the institution chose, for one unremarkable moment, to be a person first. That is what I should have told my sister. That sometimes the most extraordinary thing happening in front of an extraordinary institution has nothing to do with the ceremony. It's the thing 3 feet to the left of it. The thing nobody photographs. The thing that is over before the crowd even forms. The guard was back at his post.